Um, Lord God, we pause in your presence and hold our day before you. Still us, calm us, guide us as we enter this day. And our call to worship this morning is Micah 6:8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. And Roger has an opening song for us this morning.
Good morning, everybody. I'm really excited to lead a couple songs from the new hymnal. This first one, Flow to You, a quick search of the internet will find that this is a very popular song in African American churches. And if you have some time today, I would encourage you to do a search on YouTube for Flow to You, and there's some really cool versions of the song out there. Music is this amazing gift that allows us to connect our gratitude with that loving, caring, life-giving force that we as Christians understand to be God as seen in Jesus. And so this isn't a head song at all. It's a heart song. So open your heart and let it flow. Flow to you, flow to you. Let the river of my worship flow to you. Lord, I pray in all I do. Let the river of my worship flow to you. Like streams in the valley, swell with the rain. May the songs of my heart rise to bless your name and flow to you, flow to you. Let my worship flow to you. Flow to you, flow to you. Let the river of my worship flow to you. Lord, I pray in all I do. Let the river of my worship flow to you. Like streams in the valley, swell with the rain. Let the songs of my heart rise to bless your name and flow to you, flow to you. Let my worship flow to you. I love you, Lord, and everything about you. I worship you with all my heart. Let all my heart flow to you, flow to you. Let the river of my worship flow to you. Lord, I pray in all I do. Let the river of my worship flow to you. Like streams in the valley, swell with the rain. May the songs of my heart rise to bless your name and flow to you, flow to you. Let my worship flow to you.
Oh, good choice, Roger. That's a nice song. Thank you for introducing that to us. All right. We've come to the time of worship where we get our sister church update. Rob and Annette are not here, but Rachel has received an email from Rob and Annette and is going to fill us in.
Hey, everybody. I'm going to apologize in advance because I have a lot of names to read, and I think I'm not going to do very well pronouncing them, but I'm going to give it my best shot. So, yeah, I'm going to basically just read this email. Robin and Annette were able to talk to Angel and Jeanette last night, and so they have some prayer requests for us. They said, pray for the people at the church in San Salvador. Angel visits there regularly to preach. Everyone at the church has COVID except for one little girl. And the names of some people are, for us to pray for, are Jaime, Alejandro, Heraldo, Amanda, Odila, Omar, son la familia Reyes, Cortula, Gladys, Araceli, son la familia Perez, Israel, Saul, Maria, son la familia Luna, Oscar, Daniel, Sarita Familia Ortega, Alvaro, and Ruth Familia Gomez. They also shared that there were 8 suicides in Puerto Lucis last week. They were all young people who don't have good family or church support, and they've just been really impacted by all the COVID closures. So just they ask for prayers for the families of those who completed suicide and others in the community who are suffering from isolation and depression. Prayers for Alberto, who is in the hospital with heart problems. Prayers for Maribel, who has colon cancer. She very much appreciates our prayers. Then I'm going to share a photo of Ingrid, Angel and Jeanette's daughter, Ingrid. They've shared that she's pregnant. She's having a little girl. Her pregnancy is going well. So here's just a photo of her, and I think she looks absolutely lovely. And then they also shared that they are hoping to do baptisms in the river today. So just that we can remember them in our prayers. And yeah, it sounds like they just have a lot going on in our community, and it's very different than what our community is dealing with. So it's just very, I appreciate how it always opens my perspective to hear what they share.
Thank you, Rachel, for passing that information along. When I hear that, I hear that there's a lot to be thinking about and a lot to consider. And let's take this time to pray for peace. May I be at peace, and may my heart remain open. May I be aware of my true nature. May I be healed, and may I be a source of healing to others. May I dwell in the breath of God. And it's time for intergenerational. Gary, you're on. You have to unmute though.
That's the second time today I've been asked to unmute already. Oh, so I've got my this is a technical thing. I've got my speaker view on, but I'm still seeing you, Mary Beth. Is that how it's supposed to be, Rachel? You can see me? Okay, all right. So anyway, we're gonna give this a try. This is the finger puppet version of the story of Zacchaeus. So, hey, wait a second. Here are my here is my crowd who were following Jesus. Hey, who's going to be Jesus? Okay, Bananas, you can be Jesus. Oh, who's going to be Zacchaeus? I guess you're going to be Zacchaeus, Wishbone. Oh, okay, great. Okay, here we go. All right, so there was a crowd that were following Jesus. Oh, that's my part. Okay, I got to be Jesus. The crowd was following Jesus through the town of Jericho. He was so famous. Everybody wanted to be close to Jesus. He had been noted as a great healer and a very wise person. People said he was the Messiah, the chosen one. Yay, Jesus! And there was one person in town. He was Zacchaeus. He was very short. I can't see. Where's Jesus? So he couldn't see in the midst of the crowd. So he got an idea. He wanted to see Jesus so bad, he climbed up in the sycamore tree. Here's the sycamore tree. Okay, Wishbone, you get up there. Oh, yeah. How's that? Well, don't fall out. Okay, so Jesus came by, and Jesus noted amongst the crowd, he looked up in the tree and he said, what did he say, Wishbone, or Bananas? He said, oh, hey, Zacchaeus, come down from that tree. I want to come to your house. And Zacchaeus said, what, me? You're talking to me? Yeah, you, come on. Nobody ever invites me to their house. Well, I am. I'm inviting you to I'm going to your house. Okay. And the crowd mumbled and they said, how can this be? This holy man talking with sinners, going to sinners' house, because they didn't like Zacchaeus because he cheated them out of their money, and he was rich, and he worked with the Romans, and they hated the Romans. So, well, anyway, come on, Zacchaeus. So Zacchaeus and Jesus, let's go to your house. So they go off to Zacchaeus's house. People were still grumbling outside. Why would he be associating with sinners? Well, Zacchaeus and Jesus had a little lunch together, and Zacchaeus came out and said, hey guys, I want to tell you something. And they say, what could this sinner possibly say to us? You know what? I've taken a lot of your money, and I want to make it right. After talking to Jesus, I'm going to give you back 4 times what I've taken and give half of my wealth to the poor. And Jesus said to Zacchaeus, today, Zacchaeus, salvation has come to your house. You are a true son of Abraham. Go in peace. And the crowd were amazed as they went on through Jericho, and Jesus did more amazing things. And that's why I go to seminary. Do fun little puppet shows. So anyway, it's the best I could do. And so that is the story in a kind of a fun, whimsical way about this little story about a little man named Zacchaeus. And the point of that story, I think, that I want us to all know is when we don't always do things right in life. We make many mistakes. And these are particularly talking to the younger ones with us, maybe listening in today. Sometimes a mistake is when we didn't mean it to happen. Like I remember when I was a little kid and I was twirling around in my grandma's house, and I accidentally knocked over her lamp off the table, and it shattered into a million pieces, and I felt terrible, and I buried my head in the couch, and I was so ashamed and so embarrassed. And that's a mistake we can all make, but it wasn't intentional. But there was another time I remember when my brother had built I think it was a airplane or something out of what was the version of Legos at the time. for whatever reason, I was really mad at my brother, and I wrecked his creation just to get, because I was mad. That's another kind of mistake, if we want to call it, but that's a mistake that really is one where I needed to sincerely apologize and try to make amends, or at least work hard at doing better. And in some ways, that's the story about Zacchaeus. He realized he kind of wasn't doing with his life what God would want him to do. And he went to those he had hurt and he told them, I want to make up for it. I'm sorry. I want to do something different with my life. And so that's what he did. So we all make mistakes. Your parents, the older folks in our lives do. You do, we all do. And when we do, we just recognize it, we name it, we apologize, and we try to figure out if there's a possible way to do better or to make good. We will do that. And that's what happened with Zacchaeus when he talked with Jesus. Now this is in relationship to this story for the older ones of us. We really are in a kind of a cultural moment, I think, a Zacchaeus moment in the life of the church, in the life of our culture, when we have to look at, are we Zacchaeus as a people? Are there things we have gotten without proper, privileges we have that maybe we need to look at and examine? Have we gotten things in ways that maybe we need to help others come up to the same level as us? We need to share like Zacchaeus. I don't know, it's a challenging story, but anyway, that's what I share with you this morning.
Thank you, Gary. I know Rachel put it in the chat, but I really appreciate stories from Bananas and from Wishbone and their friends. So thank you for sharing that. And it's almost as if it was meant to be, but I made a mistake this morning and forgot to remind you all to light your candles for peace this morning. So I'm going to make it right now. So if you have your candle for peace this morning, you can go ahead and get those out. And as we remember our friends and family in Puerto Asís. And now it's time for the offering. If you're doing online giving, we have a link for that. And if you have coins for My Coins Count, we've been told that you can bring them if you have a hymnal to pick up, or when you come by the church, you can bring those. So let's pray this morning over the offering that we have. Oh, gracious God, we come to you with the gifts that we have to give. The gifts that might be monetary, the gifts that might be time, the gifts that we have that you have blessed us with. May we use them to honor and to glorify you and to be a light in this world for you. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. And it is now time for the scripture reading. And this morning, the scripture comes from Luke 18:35 through 18:35 and 19:10. Here we go. As Jesus approached Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the roadside begging. And when he heard the crowd going by, he asked what was happening. And they told him, Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. And he called out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Those who led the way rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus stopped and ordered the man to be brought to him. And when he came near, Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? Lord, I want to see, he replied. And Jesus said to him, receive your sight. Your faith has healed you. And immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus, praising God. And when all the people saw it, they also praised God. Luke 19. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner? But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anyone out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost.
Okay, thank you for that reading, Mary Beth. And the sermon or talk I'm giving this morning, it may be a little less sermonic and a little more just throwing out some ideas on this story for you. These 2 stories. I've chosen what normally would be understood as 2 standalone stories about Jesus, the story of the blind man and the story of Zacchaeus, but they are told back to back. And when we read them in the Bible, I find 2 very complementary stories about how we go about caring for ourselves and for each other. And that's essentially the theme I'm focusing on in this sermon, is how do we care for each other? So let's dig in and start with the first story, the story of the blind man by the roadside. Here we have a man who is clearly and quite literally pushed off to the side of society, and a procession of Jesus's followers are walking right past him, according to the story, and the man, being blind, disabled, has little chance of seeing or encountering. He has no chance of seeing because he's blind, and little chance of encountering Jesus personally. He's not even able to be amongst the crowd of enthusiastic admirers who are walking right by him. And so he shouts out, Son of David, have mercy on me. And those following Jesus tell him to basically be quiet, shut up. This only makes the man more determined than ever. And so the story tells us, he says even louder, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus hears him. He stops. He turns around. He comes over to the man and he asks, what do you want me to do for you? So let's stop with this in the narration of this story right there for a moment, because there are 2 very important points here that maybe just seem obvious, but they're also points that I think are worth remembering. First point number 1, the man boldly and unashamedly advocates for himself. He doesn't ask for permission. He doesn't care if others shush him. Shame has no power over him, and he obviously knows what he wants. He wants Jesus's attention. And he's not going to be satisfied till he gets it. He's going to do everything in his power for himself. Point number 2, when Jesus does stop and go over to the man, he doesn't assume that he knows what the man wants. He asks him, what do you want me to do for you? Now, that's a perfect question, because if we want to help someone, it is usually best not to assume. In fact, I get myself in trouble if I assume I know what somebody wants or needs. Even if we think we know what that person needs, naming or identifying the desire should come from that person who has that desire or need. In some ways, it seems to me that the naming of the need or want or desire itself is an essential part of our healing. We have to be able to, for ourselves, identify what it is we are seeking or wanting. And then once the man articulates his desire to have his sight restored, Jesus tells him, receive your sight. Your faith has made you well. This is an interesting thing here. It wasn't Jesus, according to the story, who restored his sight. It was the man's faith. I have to think Jesus had something to do with it. Might have been a catalyst at the very least. Something of the power of God through Jesus calls out to the higher power within the blind man, and healing happens. It's a mystery. I don't know. None of us know really, honestly, how healing happens. We can cite the mechanics of things, but we really don't know how healing happens. Receive your sight, Jesus says. Some would ask, is this to be taken literally? Did this really happen? And was the man's faith that, was it the man's faith that literally cured his blindness? Christians have taken these words, your faith has healed you, and have tried to apply it in ways that maybe the story itself wasn't intended for. As for how it is recorded in the Gospel of Luke, I'll take it at face value, but I also take it for the spiritual lesson that it is. Many who see are in fact blind in so many ways. Many of us who are abled, as they say, are in many ways disabled. Many who are blind, in fact, see quite well. Seeing is not only understood literally, but throughout the gospel stories. Seeing is equated with spiritual enlightenment and salvation. Jesus comes not necessarily to heal what blinds us physically, but comes to open our eyes and our hearts to deeper truths about who we are and who we are in relation to this life, to others, to our purpose, and to God's very loving presence. Physical handicaps, while challenging, are not nearly as challenging as spiritual ones. We all struggle with this. Then immediately following this story is the famous story of Zacchaeus. I say famous because if you had the benefit of Protestant Sunday school, I don't know about the Catholic tradition, but at least in the Protestant tradition, in the era I grew up, you probably learned the Zacchaeus song. And I will spare you my rendition of that song. Suffice it to know that I learned that Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. And he climbed up in the sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. And when the Savior passed away, he looked up in the tree and he said, Zacchaeus, you come down. I'm going to your house today. I didn't sing it, but that's it. Many of us are familiar with that story, and it sticks with us for the rest of our life. But I digress from the point I wish to make about this story. In contrast to the story of the blind man who fusses and shouts and carries on to such a degree that Jesus could hardly ignore him, here we have timid Zacchaeus, quietly climbing up a tree, just wanting to get a glimpse of this great rabbi and healer. And what happens? It's very simple. Jesus notices him. Well, the first lesson from the blind man that we just talked about is that we need to advocate for ourselves and sometimes do so aggressively. The lesson from Zacchaeus is that sometimes we, like Jesus, need to notice those silent ones in our midst and assertively interject ourselves into their lives. Jesus could easily have A, not noticed Zacchaeus, and B, had he noticed him, not thought twice about the strange little man in the tree, a man well known but not liked by his peers. Instead, what Jesus does is he does notice. And more importantly, he calls out to Zacchaeus. Jesus doesn't mind that this man is an outcast and what others might think of him associating with such a sinner. Furthermore, Jesus doesn't wait for an invite. He invites himself over to his house, to Zacchaeus' house. And out of that interaction, because Jesus took the initiative, everything changed in the wee little man's life. When I think of these two stories, I think of my own vocational work as a pastor. And I hope by sharing my thoughts on this, you might keep this in mind when it comes to relating to your pastors in the future. When it comes to pastoral care and relating to the congregation, there is I find a delicate balance between respecting people's space and privacy on one hand and being more proactive in relating by actively seeking out and, to use the phrase from the story, going to your house today, as Jesus says to Zacchaeus. As I tried to explain in the pastoral letter I sent out this past week, the pastor doesn't know or isn't aware of all the relational points that are happening within the church. There are many informal connections and communications that happen in any healthy church where people are ministering and caring to one another in an organic, natural way. No program needed. On the other hand, there are needs within the congregations, struggles, hurts, burdens, addictions, marital crisis, loneliness, etc., that go unaddressed or cared for. These two models of care that we just looked at in the Bible, the blind man on the roadside and the wee man in the tree, are important to keep in mind. The model of the blind man who asks boldly for what he needs is a model to keep in mind. In other words, to remember, you are in charge of seeking to meet your needs and seeking out help when needed. The second model, the model of Jesus who is paying attention and reaching out to a shy, quiet outcast, is the other model. In other words, we are our sister and brother's keeper, and we ought to have our radars out for others perhaps too shy or too insecure or too modest to yell out from their sycamore tree. In other words, care is incumbent upon our individual selves, but it's also incumbent upon us as a community to be mindful and watchful of those in our midst who may be hurting but not speaking out for themselves. When I thought of these two models of care, self-advocacy, and I guess the other would be called noticing others and reaching out, I realized there's a third model of care from another gospel story. If you recall in Mark's gospel, there's a story of a man who couldn't walk. And Jesus was meeting and speaking in the house of Peter. The place was packed, and some man who couldn't walk was carried up on the roof of Peter's house. The man's friends broke through the roof and lowered their friend down into the room in the hopes that Jesus would heal him. And Jesus does. He forgives his sins, and to demonstrate the power of God, he commands the man to walk, and he does. And this, I'd say, is a third way of caring. And this is when we can't advocate for ourselves. Sometimes we need others to do so for us. Parents do this for their children all the time because they can't do it for themselves. Children can't. Another example is if you've ever been in a situation in a medical emergency, you probably know how this goes. I have discovered whenever one has to be in the hospital, one needs to have an advocate, someone who will listen when the doctor comes in to explain things, someone who can help with decisions, someone who can ask good questions. Not everybody has that. I was lucky when I was in the hospital for just over 40 days, 6 years ago, and many of you were just holding me in prayer during that time, and I so appreciate it. My wife, who is a nurse, was my advocate too. She knew the questions to ask and wasn't shy about speaking up when I couldn't speak for myself. And having gone through that experience, a few years later, I got a call when I was in Spokane saying that one of the friends of one of the members at Spring Valley Mennonite Church was in the hospital for cancer. Her name was Linda. She didn't have much in her life, family-wise or money-wise. She'd gone through a lot of rough trials in her life. She had 3 sons, all of them absent, you might say, without leave. And they were living on the streets themselves, broken with drugs and poverty, and not available physically or emotionally to really help their mom. Sue, my good friend, and I committed to being her advocate during her hospital journey. Over the course of a few months of her hospital stay, and unfortunately, the hospital stay turned into a hospice stay. At that point, it was pure ministry of presence until she passed away. So that's the third model of care, advocating for others when they cannot advocate for themselves, just as the friends of the man who couldn't walk advocated for him. So there you have the essence of my message this morning. I offer three models of care that are applicable to us personally and also to us as a church in these stories of Jesus. One is care by self-advocacy. The other is care by being sensitive to those who are in need and reaching out to them. And the third is care by being an alert and present advocate for those unable to advocate for themselves. So that's the sermon. It doesn't feel super sermonic to me, if that's the thing, but it is what I offer this morning in terms of content to think about. And I will give us a little bit of time. Have there been stories or ideas that have come to you in terms of seeking help, or are there times when you've had advocates for you? I'll just open it for a little discussion, and then we'll move on. Don't you love the awkward silence? It's not a problem, but give us a moment to think. And it's fine if we don't have any follow-up with that, but are there other models of care that other than those three paradigms I'm throwing out there this morning?
So I have a thought. Oh, am I muted?
No, you're on.
Oh, okay. Anyway, of course, you all know about all of my vertigo, and I'm in remission now, but you know, Haley and Rick both advocated for me continuously. I mean, Rick was there, you know, for most of the attacks, and, you know, helped me to bed and helped get my jeans off if needed, and carried my barf bag to the trash. And, you know, that, you know, I think if I'd been alone, I don't think I would have been able to deal with that. And then Haley went to all of our doctor appointments with us. And the cause of my remission was that the new doctor said, you know, Haley asked if he did those shots of the ear, and he said yes. And would you like to do it today? And she said yes. And I said, let me think. And she said yes. And we did it. And so that was a fairly aggressive form of advocacy, but she was absolutely right. And, you know, she's a nurse practitioner, so she knew better than the patient at that moment. So, and I think we've all been in that position. I mean, I'm sure Leonard has been in that position. He's not here today, but with Karen this week, and, you know, Jill and Dan, it's just like, we're so lucky to have people to advocate for us, and we don't know what we'd do without them.
Yeah, not everybody gets to have a medical person in their immediate family. So, yeah.
Gary, if I may make a reply to your message, you spoke about you connected back to your Sunday school,
Mm-hmm.
and the story of the first person along the side of the road calling out. We've become, as individuals and as churches, a group of very good givers, but we're poor receivers. And we have this thing, we don't want to call attention to ourselves. And so we expect others to notice. And you might have gone through something where you were sick for a time, or down and away from the church community, and you lament that I was down and no one called. I never heard a thing. We have this notion that somehow the church, the community in the church, somehow intuitively knows what's going on with us. And there's a time where we have to call, we have to be our own advocate, as you observe. We have to, because our society puts ourselves in little cells. Where we're not in a place sometimes to be good observers for the rest of the community.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, we're very, I mean, that the story of the blind beggar on the road. I mean, he's nothing stopping that man. I mean, he's and it is a good model for us, a good reminder that it's okay to advocate for ourselves. And you're right, we can't expect people in the church to intuitively know what we need or what's going on. The pastor cannot intuitively know that. And at the same time, the other model is we do have to try to be somewhat either intuit or at least be as sensitive as we can to what we're seeing amongst our sisters and brothers.
So building on a little bit on that, our society really teaches, especially the male portion, to be self-reliant, and we don't need to have help. And that's one of the main problems that the male part of the population needs to overcome, is this macho thing. And so that gets in the way of clearly some mental health issues for people that refuse to seek help themselves. And then the other thing, if you go back 200 years to when we lived in villages, we're very close to each other in many cases. You couldn't help but notice if something was going wrong with somebody. They weren't able to quite walk as well as they could or whatever. And it was multi-generational families. It was pretty obvious, and it was very easy to notice and inquire about somebody's situation. And today we all live isolated to some extent from our neighbors, and we don't even know many of them. So we get together Sunday at church, and some of us are more often than that, but it's that last thing of being able to notice is a lot more difficult in our society today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Anonymity is way easier in our culture than in others. And loneliness is obviously more of an issue for us.
Gary, this is Kathy. I was noticing in that story, the first story about, this is kind of a negative message of like what not to do. Where it's the people telling the blind guy who's trying to advocate for himself, they're telling him to be quiet, and they're telling him like sternly they're like mad at him for trying to advocate for himself. And I feel like we see a lot of that in our culture too. You know, when people are trying to advocate for themselves and we're all telling them to be quiet or to wait or something like that.
You're thinking in terms of some of the protests that people.
I'm thinking of like Black Lives Matter,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
or civil rights, you know, organizing for a million years, you know, Latinas, DACA students. I mean, I can think of like LGBTQ, you know, there's all kinds of groups where people are trying to advocate for themselves, and many are telling them, you know, be quiet, or, you know, stop whining, or
Yeah, right.
that kind of thing. So anyway,
Yeah.
I feel like that's a message from this story for me too.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And to follow up with Kathy, this morning's Idaho Statesman, buried in the sports section is a story about the women's basketball team and some of the Black women who have decided to take a knee, and the flack that they're getting and the letters and pushback that they're getting, that they are there to play basketball and nothing else. And I'm not sure what my response is going to be, but I feel like I'm going to at least write some kind of an open letter to say, look, Kathy, you need to know there's other people standing behind you too.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Is there anything else that we would like to add to the stone soup here? Oh, Karen.
So I when I hear this verse, I often get really caught up in part one of it. And you alluded to this in the sermon, but didn't elaborate on it, which is that a lot of people, particularly evangelicals, will use that as as evidence that the Bible is telling us all we need to do is ask for what we want and God will give it to us. And I have a long time friend who developed alopecia totalis, so losing all of her hair all over. And it's devastating to her because she believes really deeply and firmly that if she would pray hard enough, she'll be rewarded with hair again. And she just, I mean, although it sounds kind of silly, she believes that. And so what she tells herself is that her faith isn't good enough for her to be rewarded yet. And I know that she's not the only one. It's something that I've heard before in patients and family members, that if they just pray harder, their family member is going to come off the vent. And if the family member dies, then it's their fault because they didn't have enough faith. And I would like to see progressive Christians who don't really think that way as much formulate a response to that we would be able to, I don't know, help people see that it's not just about faith. I don't even know if I can really word it how I want to, but I guess maybe I just want to say that the part of the Bible verse in this sermon today that really speaks to me is that one, because I know there's a lot of people caught up in that belief.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Karen. That's that was a harder one to really go into very deeply with in terms of unpacking it in the sermon, because I strongly believe in the power of prayer, but I don't think that means that the outcome of which we are praying for will necessarily bend to what we want. So it is a terrible burden for somebody to feel, well, something didn't happen because it was my fault. I didn't have enough faith, and that's reading that particular story in a light that's probably not, well, not just probably, it is not helpful. And it just adds another layer of burden on the person. Kind of like, you can't manipulate God and you can't get to determine the narratives that are unfolding, but you certainly can make your requests known to God. And who knows, prayer is a mystery as far as I can tell. But it's important. Why don't we move to our song of response? Roger, would you like to carry us forward with that?
Okay, for our song of response, let's do another one from the new hymnal, Voices Together. I Will Sing With You. Give you a moment to get that open. I will sing with you, my family, will you sing with me? I will sing with you, my family, will you sing with me? The notes won't always come out as I like, but I will learn to see the log in my own eye. God, I surrender. Bring a us together, bring us together. I will sing with you, my neighbor, will you sing with me? I will sing with you, my neighbor, will you sing with me? My words will be imperfect, but I'll try. I'm bringing my assumptions to the light. I'll pray, God, I'll surrender. Bring us together, bring us together. I will sing with you, my rival, will you sing with me? I will sing with you, my rival, will you sing with me? Difference is a place where God is found. In seeking peace, walking on to holy ground, God, we surrender. Bring us together, bring us together. We will sing our song together in harmony. We will sing our song together, whether two or three. Jesus feels our pain, he sets us free. The Spirit's given us the song of hope to sing. God, we surrender. Bring us together, bring us together, bring us together, bring us together.
Thank you, Roger. It's fun getting to know those new songs. We have come to our time of sharing our joys and concerns with each other. I'm not great at finding all of you, so if you want, dear God, for all of those things that lie in our hearts and that lie in the hearts of our friends and family, we lift them all to you and we pray together. God of love, hear our prayer. And now we have a sending song from Roger.
So for our sending song, let's open up. We will walk with God. And we'll sing it through 2 times. We will walk with God, my brothers, we will walk with God. We will walk with God, my sisters, we will walk with God. We will go rejoicing till the kingdom has come. We will go rejoicing till the kingdom has come. We will walk with God, my brothers, we will walk with God. We will walk with God, my sisters, we will walk with God. We will go rejoicing till the kingdom has come. We will go rejoicing till the kingdom has come.
Thank you, Roger. For ascending blessing, this is one that comes out of this new hymnal. I'm reading it, but it's nice. May the Son of God, who is already formed in you, grow in you, so that for you, God will become immeasurable, and that in you, God will become laughter, exultation, the fullness of joy, which no one will take from you. Have a great week.